What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
Sir?
The most you ever lost on a coin toss?
I don't know. I couldn't say.
Call it.
Call it. For what?
Just call it.
Well, we need to know what we're calling it for here.
You need to call it. I can't call it for you. It wouldn't be fair.
I didn't put nothing up.
Yes, you did. You've been putting it up your whole life. You just didn't know it. You know what date is on this coin? 1958. It's been traveling 22 years to get here. And now it's here. And it's either heads or tails. And you have to say, call it.
Well, look, I need to know what I stand to win.
Everything.
How's that?
You stand to win everything. Call it.
All right. Heads then.
Well done. Don't put it in your pocket.
Sir?
Don't put it in your pocket. It's your lucky water.
Where do you want me to put it?
Anywhere not in your pocket. Or it'll get mixed in with the others and become just a coin. Which it is.
You are tuned in to God's Property Radio. Here are your hosts, Sam and Dan.
I go by Sam, and welcome back to God's Property Radio. I just got back from vacation and haven't actually hung out with Dan really yet. But this conversation on this episode is a very exciting one. It's a follow-up with Paul J. Hansen. I think we spoke for over an hour, and I got to ask him a lot of the questions that I would have wanted to ask him in a future interview to follow up with our first interview that we ever did with him as episode 8 of our normal episodes, not part of the Coin Toss series, but episode 8 of GPR, Placing the Burden of Proof with Paul J. Hansen. Now, I was a little bummed that Dan couldn't be a part of it because Dan always has amazing questions, and it's just a really good chemistry, I think, with Dan in the room with me asking questions. So unfortunately, he didn't get to be a part of that, so you have to just listen to me ask questions. But I'm sure, I don't know, we'll probably get a chance to talk to Paul again, I hope. And, Lord willing, hopefully Paul and Kent will get out of this mess and come back out swinging for the Lord, So, yeah, with that being said, I want to keep this very, very short, but I do feel it upon my heart here to kind of just really quickly lift up a brother in Christ and his wife, a guy named Jeff that's helped me with some things, and he's a listener of our show, and his wife just had a miscarriage, and I know that they were very much looking forward to having a child, and I know it's got to be so rough because, my mother, I think probably still battles a little bit emotionally with the 3 miscarriages she had before me and one in between my sister and I. So I don't know what it's like, but I just want to lift them up to the Lord right now, and just, if you guys could just say a little prayer for them and keep them in your heart here. And thanks, Jeff, for supporting us and befriending us, and just all the help that you've given us. So I will be covering some other things at the end of this episode, but I think right now I just want to get into the conversation that I had with Paul, and I hope it answers questions for any people out there that are wondering more about this legal topic, and might just want to get the latest scoop on Paul J. Hansen, as he's not as popular as Kent Hovind. I think Kent has a lot of supporters at this point, but Paul's the underdog in this, I think, and I think he has a lot of intelligent things to say, and I'm backing Paul 100% as well as I am Kent. So without further ado, here's our buddy Paul J. Hansen.
Here we go.
And the churches are too scared, even more scared to say anything at that moment than they were before, because they're scared that they're going to lose their property tax exemption, and and the congregation's brainwashed to think that the United States, you must follow the United States written laws and whatever they wish, and the attorneys, whatever they recommend, that's by far the best thing to do. There's one thing after another.
Yeah.
If you don't know history, you tend to repeat it. So that's what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. So, are you familiar with the whole Indianapolis Baptist Temple case at all?
No.
Okay, that's one that I've had come up. There was this guy named Robin Wright. Have you ever heard of Robin Wright or the Lordship Church at all?
No, I don't think so.
Well, basically, what he did, or what he used to do, I think he's deceased now, but he used to basically help churches back out of the incorporation, not just the tax exemption, the 501c3, but his contention was that the Lordship Church, they never ever went into a court because as soon as you walk into a court, you're basically, giving up or telling them that they have jurisdiction over you, And so that was their stance.
Yeah, you don't want to walk into the wrong court. The U.S. court is the wrong court for people that want to remain independent.
I did find my notebook now. I've got all my questions and stuff. But if we could just get an update. The last time I talked to you was just very brief, and I'd like to, if you can just, when the time runs out on this call, just keep calling me back. I loaded more money on my account, so we should be good to go for.
Okay. Go ahead, fire away. Yeah, basically the update is I'm just waiting for discovery. My attorney's supposed to be putting in the documents for discovery, and basically I want to know all the evidence that they're going to present. All it boils down to is they claim that a letter was sent to a title company that they claim was a fraudulent representation that the Creation Science Evangelism owned a legal interest in property. And all the letter contended was that we believe that the court ruling that the property was not in a trust, that it was truly held by Kent Hovind, is a completely false ruling. We believe that the court had no jurisdiction to make that determination, had no authority to administrate that property because it was independent of the United States system. Should have went into a court of record, a people's court, not a U.S. court, to make that determination. If they claimed they had a right to it, they would have had to prove it in that court. So that letter basically just noticed then that we were eventually going to take it into a court of record and prove that the court had no jurisdiction to take it away from us, and that the title company should consider that if they're trying to sell title insurance or provide title insurance to prospective buyers of that land. So the 9 properties did sell, and various people did buy them. I believe everybody had title insurance. So if we do go back into court and prove that the court had no jurisdiction to use that property as a forfeiture on Ken Hovind's case, then we'd get that property back, and then title insurance would have to try to work out a deal to get the whole thing unwound.
Wow.
Which would have been a whole lot better if you would have just waited. It's been a lot better and more prudent if they would have just waited until we had our day in court. But they didn't want to do that. They just wanted to slam dunk the thing and have a pretense of jurisdiction where their jurisdiction is extremely limited in the United States courts.
Right.
They have jurisdiction on their land. That's it.
Yep.
I'll give you an example of a ridiculous federal intrusion. This guy's in jail, and he calls his friend. And his friend answers the phone, and he says, the marshals are offering me this deal. And the guy goes, well, you're innocent. Why would you take the deal? The guy says, I wouldn't cooperate with them at all. You're innocent. Just fight your case on principle. Guess what? The SWAT team shows up at that guy's house, arrests him, charges him with instructing somebody not to cooperate with the U.S. Marshals, and threatens him with 20 years in jail, and threatens that if he doesn't plead guilty and take a plea deal of 5 years, that he'll go after his brother-in-law's accounting service.
Wow.
So he gets scared. And he goes, okay, I'm not going to risk 20 years. I'll just take my 5 years and spend 2.5 years in jail and halfway house, and then I'll be out. I mean, just think of that, how evil that is.
Oh, yeah.
He receives a call from his friend, and he just says, I wouldn't cooperate with them.
No. And, that's actually, this happens all the time where they get you to, like people to, what do you call it, plead guilty for something just so that you don't have to go through all the court fees, because just to fight it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And then by the time you fought it,
plea bargain, yeah.
you might end up going for 20 years anyway. And if you just take the plea bargain, bam, you get a 5-year sentence or a 10-year sentence as opposed to 20 or 30 years, It's just, it's nuts. It's totally backward.
Yeah, my minister says that that's not biblical. He says there's no place in the biblical sense where you are allowed to do that, other than just you're allowed to confess up front, but it's not a conditional confession. It's just standard, just like you catch a little child stealing candy. You just ask him, did you steal the candy? And he has a chance to say yes or no. You don't sit there and say, well, if you say you stole the candy, I'm going to let you go, and you'll just give me $5. But if you don't tell me you stole the candy, I'm going to contact your parents and say you stole the candy.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So it's a form of extortion. So did you want me to start out with kind of laying out some of the revamping some of what we got here?
Yeah, why don't you update me, because I have talked to you once, and I did actually I haven't quite brought.
Yeah.
Why don't you update me as of brand new stuff that's going on, and you can recap a little bit on maybe what you talked about before, but I do have all that archived as well. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the whole premise of the case is, does the U.S. courts have the jurisdiction to shut down a church ministry? Because that's really what happened here. The U.S. court just came in and shut down a church ministry. And this church ministry was operating on land that's not owned by the United States. It's private property. But as far as the recent things that are going here, Kent has a public defender that's doing nothing. I have a public defender that's doing nothing. These guys are supposed to defend you zealously, and by law they have to defend you zealously. I sent in 11 documents or 10 documents instructing the public defender to do certain things on discovery, at least get discovery started and so forth. He's been my public defender for 3 weeks, and he hasn't done a single thing. And I'm going to be in court in 3 weeks, pretty close. So 4 weeks, and it's just pathetic. And then I notified the courts. I'm waiting for that hearing to be heard. It's a motion to compel to get him to do something. And I'm not about to pay $50,000 for some attorney to defend me here. It's ridiculous.
No.
It's absolutely insane to do stuff like that. It's a type of extortion. So what I did is I sent 11 documents to the court, and I titled them "File for Record," and it's instructions to the public defender of what to do to defend me. So now he cannot say that he didn't know, because I'm using the court record as evidence of his notification. And then you're certainly allowed to do that, to use that court record. It's part of due process for you. You can, if you have a public defender and he's not doing nothing, go ahead and write the court record. Just put on the document, file for record, and give your little story of when you met with the prosecutor, what you told him to do, and who he is, and so forth, and say that he hasn't done nothing in X number of days. And you can come back and sue the guy civilly, I believe, for not doing his job. He's contracted with you in a sense to defend you, and he's an officer of the court, and he's supposed to be the expert. They're not allowed to throw you in jail and just have everybody conspire to work against you, so there's no way that you ever develop a meaningful case. And that's exactly what happens when you go against the state or a large insurance company or a bank. The attorneys are actually told to throw the case. Otherwise, they get blacklisted. And anyway, they're basically insurgents. that are pretending to be on your side, but they're in most ways they're actually working for the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wicked and evil thing. So that's what I'm waiting on right now, for this attorney to do something. And even though I was quite impressed when I talked to him, he said he was going to do all this stuff and this and that, but I haven't heard a letter from him. I haven't had a single peep from him in 3 weeks. He won't receive my calls. He's not answering any of my letters. So that's very, very frustrating. But anyway, I believe that's a due process violation that we can bring up, and I'll certainly present to the jury at a given time, because I do have a record of asking him what to do, and the jury's going to be notified. He was told to do this on the such and such date, and he hadn't done it. And they can just say, well, you guys blew your chance to give this guy a fair trial. We're not going to find him guilty. That's what a juror should do. And one of the interesting things is we've been reading some of the documents here that are court transcripts from hearings that are done in Florida, and the judges are actually telling the jury that they must come back with a unanimous verdict, but they forget to tell them that one juror, all he has to do is vote not guilty.
Right.
Now, just think about it. I tell you, okay, you 12 people, you got to come back in here with a unanimous jury verdict. Don't come back in until you do. This is what these judges tell these people. You got to come back in here with a unanimous jury verdict. The judge can lie to these people big time with no consequences, because guess who's going to protect him? Another judge, U.S. court judge. So anyway,
you have 60 seconds remaining.
You can just.
I know the law good enough to where I can instruct the jury to. I'll call you back when this is done. Okay?
Yeah, just keep calling me back. So.
Yeah, but anyway, I'll instruct the jury that you're being lied to. You can walk into that deliberation room and you can write on a piece of paper, not guilty. You can lay it in the middle of the table. You don't have to listen to a single person. You don't have to talk to nobody. You don't have to do nothing. You could go lay on the couch. You're done.
Wow.
You don't have to deliberate nothing. They're lying to you. And that, see, a lot of times juries they put pressure on people to change the verdict. And because they go, well, 11 of us believe he's guilty. You need a unanimous vote. We're gonna be stuck here all night if you don't give us unanimous vote. I read these transcripts, but the judge forgets to tell them that's only for a guilty verdict. He doesn't tell them it doesn't have to be unanimous for any other reason. So if one juror doesn't want to vote, he's got the complete say-so of causing a criminal case to go with a not guilty verdict.
Right.
But what they do is they tell these jurors that you got to come out of here with you either got to see, this is what they trick these people into thinking. You got to either come out here with a unanimous not guilty or a unanimous guilty, and you're gonna stay in there until you get that. It's a big lie.
Right.
It's pathetic. I can't believe it when I read these judges are actually telling these people that.
That's
not
That's not even what we were taught.
I know it. But you're sitting there and this judge is telling you that this is the law of our land, and the jurors are picked, because they're not the brightest legal minds in the world. Otherwise, the opposing party would make sure they're not on there. They don't want no freedom-thinking people on there. So that's one thing that me and Kent will make sure that doesn't happen. And in this case, see, the party that's coming against us is, the United States of America. All they have to do is take us into a civil court and claim damages for these alleged letters that were passed and this les pendum that Kent Hovind filed, which is just simply a notice that he's going to prosecute a case in the future to get the right to the property that they claim they had the right to take away. All they had to do is go into a civil case and convince the jury that, our actions damaged them. That's what anybody else would have to do. But no, they come in heavy-handed and they turn it into a criminal thing. It's pathetic. It's just heavy-handed, disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
In common law, you generally have to have a damaged party.
Right. Can you just, briefly, because I don't think everybody knows about common law, can you just talk a little bit about common law real quick?
Sure. You got to be careful with the common law because it's not common. If you go to an island, they're going to have their law, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to be common to them. You go to another island, they're going to have their law. You go to a family, they're going to have their law. One family's going to say you got to be back by 10. Another family says as long as you get home by midnight, everything's cool. So common law just seems it's common to that body politic or that family or that location. So be careful with the term common law. Now, the United States defines common law in their U.S. Code as their laws. So don't ever use the word common law in their system because the judge would say, oh yeah, I agree. And he's just deceiving you because you're trying to refer to the English common law possibly, which is the biblical standard. And he's going, oh, yeah, common law. Yeah, we got that in our papers. It says right here that, that's our law. So, but common law historically in the American founding fathers' minds was biblical law. English common law was biblical law. Had a great deal to do with the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta, that just means the Great Charter, and it was predominantly based on trying to apply biblical standards to every situation. Does that kind of answer your question?
Sure. So the whole argument is that that without the contract, then we're under common law, or under that common law, which is biblical law.
Well, in relationship to jurisdiction with the United States courts, you have to do activity on their land to get territorial jurisdiction. If they don't have territorial jurisdiction, they have to have effect jurisdiction. You have to shoot a bow and arrow into their jurisdiction or mail a letter to their jurisdiction to affect them.
Right.
To create a degree of jurisdiction.
Which is actually kind of genius because as you told me in our last conversation, you told me about how somebody went to a post office and got arrested because that's government property. And it's just interesting because if a post office is government property, then our whole U.S. Postal Service is a way to contract you, isn't it? I mean, in essence, because you're sending something through their system.
Well, they have to prove that. See, at times in history, all of our mail moved over federal systems. But there was a time in history when the federal post office sold the activity of the post office to the United States Postal Service. It's no longer in the day. See, there's only part of the post office, the United States Post Office. Then there's another part. I think they did this 5 or 10 years ago. It's the United States Postal Service. And it's possible that if you're the mailing of your letter, okay, let's say I mailed it at the front of my house. That's not government land. Then it passed through a post office that's not government land, and it ended up in your mailbox that's not government land. It never passed their federal land to become to give them jurisdiction over that process or the contents of that the product. So let's say there was marijuana in there. They never got territorial jurisdiction over the subject matter, over the subject of that envelope. Now, if the letter did pass a federal zone, then they would have. Now, if it doesn't pass the federal zone and it passes through a United States Postal Service location, that's no different than me driving my car onto an IBM corporation's land and then driving back off. Yeah, I drove on land that is governed by federal law, but it's not.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
So it's these United States Postal Service locations, many of them are governed by federal law, but they're not owned.
Right.
So what I do in my court situations, I make them bring in evidence that the letters that they're accusing me of mailing passed over a federal zone. Because they're accusing me of mail fraud. Now, mail fraud has to pass. I believe it has to pass over a federal zone, or at least end up in a federal zone. The title company is not a federal zone. My house isn't a federal zone, so they have to prove that somewhere in between there it passed over a federal zone. I believe for that United States written law to have force and effect. Otherwise, it remains in common law. It remains in common law. A common law court would have to, which is a non-USA court, would have to, they'd have to prove that they were damaged.
Right.
They couldn't go to a U.S. court.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess number one, this is one I didn't have written down, but could you just tell me a little bit about Glenn Stoll at all? Because I don't know who Glenn is, but I've seen his name all over some documents and things. And you knew Glenn, right?
Yeah, Glenn Stoll he's out of Washington. He was a paralegal for like 20 years, and he got just totally frustrated because he told me that he would try to use their system to get justice in the courts, and he just found out that they either changed the rules or just didn't follow the rules, and they just changed the rules in the middle of the game, and he couldn't get anywhere. So he just started studying how to be independent from the United States court system, and so he learned how to put trust together, and he has like 250 people use the trust that are deemed to be completely independent of the United States system. So these trusts operate under common law of the English common law, which is non-USA, doesn't associate with the federal written laws or the state written laws, and we don't do any business on state or federal land.
Okay.
So they're completely independent. And if anybody's got a beef with that trust or wants to try to administer that trust in some way, they cannot go to a U.S. court, a U.S. administrator. That's what a U.S. judge is. He's a U.S. written law administrator. They have to go into a English common law setting, which is the jury of 12. The only tribunal that exists there is the plaintiffs and the defendants and the 12 jurors. The tribunal that exists in a U.S. court is the judge, the jury, plaintiff, and defendant. So the judge and jury work together. You don't want that.
No.
But anyway, he's an excellent mind. I still work with him, but does that answer your question with him?
Yeah. I was just wondering who he was and whatnot. So, because I've heard his name mentioned a bunch of times. I've interviewed Ernie on our show and a bunch of other people and Kent, and so I was just trying to get your how you knew him and everything.
Sure.
So yeah, I have a bunch of stuff here. I'm gonna try to. I don't have any specific order, but I wanted to say one thing in reference to the last time we spoke, which feels like forever ago. But you were talking about how you haven't driven with a license plate since 2010. I think you said. I believe if that's right.
A long time. I don't even know.
Right.
Probably before that. But
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you had mentioned the not for hire thing, and if anybody wants to listen to that, I don't want to go through this again because you can go back to our 8th episode to listen to that if anybody wants to hear that. But it was interesting was a week after we had that conversation with you, somebody came into our campground with a big truck that was pulling a travel trailer, and then the truck had a not for hire license plate on it. It was so coincidental, and we asked them about why they had a not for hire, and it said not for hire. I think what they told Dan at least. I think they had one license plate on one side, so it was legitimately licensed, but they had a not for hire. We were like, why do you have the not for hire? And I guess they said they used that not to go through the way stations, like with their truck or whatever. So that was.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just thought that was funny because one of those weird coincidences. Okay.
Sure.
You're a businessman. I mean, you've had different properties and stuff like that. How do you run a business as a corporation and yet remain sovereign? I mean, that sounds like an oxymoron to me when I wrote this question a while back. But how do you corporately run your business or have a bank account, all that stuff? How do you run like a campground? How do you run any type of business and remain sovereign?
Well, sovereign isn't the proper word because only God is sovereign, but the proper word is independent. Just the Declaration of Independence is exactly what it means, independence.
Okay.
And the American dream, the American new trial. I mean, we're considered a new experiment at that time. Was independence. Mm-hmm. Independence from being, but subject to the complete rule of God. So the Constitution says the consent of the governed. You don't have to consent to be governed by the United States written laws. You can stay independent, but if you want to, you have the right to contract. You go right in there. But
You have 60 seconds remaining.
if you want to take on a U.S. corporation status, you're going to be subject to the congressional laws.
Right.
But you can you can do the same business without taking on United States an obligation to follow United States laws. Just start a business, and you can have members in that business, and you just operate independent of the United States. Just stay off their land, and you'll do just fine. You can open bank accounts. You can contact the Social Security system, and they'll tell you how to open a bank account. I got a system for it. When I get out, we can work on it.
Nice.
How to open a bank account without a Social Security number, and your bank will call the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve will say, "Yeah, go ahead, open the account for it with no Social Security number." You'll be you can operate that way because only a U.S. citizen has. Yeah, if you are a U.S. citizen, you have to provide a Social Security card with opening a bank account. If you are not a U.S. citizen, you don't have to. It would be a criminal act to do so. Okay, go ahead. Next question.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Say that I was about to purchase a house. Say that I'm renting a house, and now I decide I want to buy the house that I'm renting. What would you do, or what should I do if I was going to properly do that in a way that wouldn't be detrimental to me in a legal sense, or any type of ramifications could come upon me in the future? I'm just generally stating this because I don't know anything about it, but I'm just asking what you would do.
Well, what I would do now is I would write a letter to the Register of Deeds, and I would tell them that I want to purchase this property, but I do not want to register contractually with the state, county, or city, and ask them for guidance how to be noticed of the record as the owner without being contractually tied to any of their services. And they're probably going to ignore you, but do that by a notary presentment. And you don't have to use certified mail or anything, just first-class mailing. And so that's your evidence of wanting to take possession of this home. Now, what some people have been doing is, because when you buy a house and you go down and you register the title, right? And then they hand you a document of in Nebraska, it's called some kind of a transfer statement, and it's full of information about how you're basically transferring the property into jurisdiction of the present county, which they send that to their system, and it continues the property taxes against you because you're registering, you're contracting with. Registering is contractual relationship. That's what it does. So you don't want to register, you just want to file for record. Now, people have gone in and they've asked the clerks of the registrar's office, I just want to file for record on this. And the clerks go, you know what? We have a stamp here with file for record on it. We never did know what this thing was for. And but anyway,
wow.
You just put the deed in. A deed is not a document that registers if you put file for record on it. But in Nebraska, they said you can't file a deed unless you put this transfer statement with it. And this transfer statement is the one that's really extremely damaging to you. Now, honestly, I have not transferred a property in which I've done this, but this is. I've just been so busy with so many other things that that's exactly what I'll be doing. And then if the clerk of the court, not the clerk, but the Register of Deeds doesn't want to answer that question, I'm going to pull them into a court of record and force them to answer that question. They cannot force you into a contract with the state, county, or city. They'll be scared to death to be sitting in front of a court of record and be forced to answer that question. So it'll be very interesting. The court of record is a Article 7 court that operates in common law if you convene it properly.
Right.
It's a court recognized by the United States system as operating in common law, because it says right in there that these cases are not appealable by any U.S. court.
Right.
Very interesting statement. So that's what I would do. As soon as I get out, and I can work on this intensely and get everybody doesn't have to recreate the will we'll just do this. But in Florida, for example, we've got several properties on property tax. I mean, they're actually giving the money back to us.
Wow.
Past taxes. Amazing, yeah.
That's crazy.
So they wouldn't do that without. They wouldn't be doing that without some legal leverage on our side.
That's really interesting.
But I believe you should be. I believe you should be able to get it all back ever since you were the owner of that property. And I think the court of record might be able to do that for you. But if you send your kids to their schools, then you got something to pay.
Right, and that's,
if you homeschool.
You know what? That's a perfect segue, because I was going to ask you about homeschool, because my children are 3 and 1, and that's going to be coming up. We're actually going to be homeschooling. How do you go about doing that in a proper way that doesn't contract you?
Well, there's no contract element at all to it. So if you pay property taxes, you can send your kids to any class they offer. You don't have to send them to their school. But if you don't want to send them to any of them, you don't have to. Now, if you're not paying property taxes, then you're not paying for their services of that school, so you're not it's unethical for you to send your kids there. But there's nothing. You don't have to do nothing. If they're gonna tell you have to do this and this and this and this, and you just notify me, and I'll tell you. I'll show you how to notify them that you're not operating within their territorial jurisdiction. And the only way they can come after you then is in a common law setting, using English common law, biblical law, to show that your children are being damaged by your conduct.
Yeah,
They're going to have to convince 12 people of that.
Yeah, I have some friends that used to do all the paperwork for homeschooling and stuff, and now they don't do anything. Like, they've just, I guess what people are calling that these days is unschooling. But yeah, I think they would find what you just said, really interesting. So. Yeah.
You don't have to. If you're independent, why would you have to do anything?
Right.
You don't have to do nothing. Just obey God. Obey God's laws, and you'll be fine.
Okay. Here's another question. How does one receive health care without Social Security number or birth certificate? How do you get treated for things at hospitals, etc.? If I hurt myself, etc.? How does that work as an independent?
Well, if you do have a Social Security number and you quit using it, you don't have a Social Security number anymore. So it's a contractual thing. So if you go, I do not advise somebody to use a Social Security number and then the next week say, I don't use a Social Security number, and the next week use it. If you ever do use it, because you're in a situation that's extremely difficult to operate in that business, just put a disclaimer in there that you're using it under coercion, and that you're being deprived of a necessity if you don't turn it over to them.
Right.
Just put a little notation in there on the back of the document, asterisk notice it somehow. Then that way you can't be prosecuted for fraud, for saying you're not a U.S. citizen one day and you act like you are the next day. So that's what I recommend, because even though I don't use a Social Security number, there's still a few times in every so many years that they require you to give them one. The more I learn, the less I have to do that. But just give them that disclaimer, and you'll be all right. Just put right on it that there's no evidence that you're a U.S. citizen, but they've required this number from you regardless. And then you can go to the Social Security office and say that you have a religious conviction that the United States system is the beast as mentioned in Revelations, and that you don't want any association with the beast, and you want to conduct your life without using a Social Security number, and you can't even get a passport or a bank account or this or that, or you can't get on this library or whatever without giving them a Social Security number, and they'll give you a form that says you're not required to provide a Social Security number for any reason at all.
Right.
And you can take that form. You can take that form to anybody that asks for that Social Security number, and they might refuse to do business with you because they have a right to do that in some situations. Governments often do not have that right. But anyway, we have people that are using those forms, and very successfully. They take that form into a bank. The bank calls the Federal Reserve, says, we got this form here, says he's not required to give a Social Security number for any reason. Feds tell the guy, give him a bank account.
Okay, so back on the whole license or no license and driving, since you've been doing that, unlike any of us that are listening for a while now, what happens when you get in a car accident and the other person has a license? Is there a conflict there?
No. You just all you're required to do is identify yourself and give them a place that you can be contacted at.
Okay.
And just don't refer to it as a residence on any of the documents. Just say it's not a resident of the United States. When you write your mailing address on it, you can just put care of, and you don't have to put a bunch of fancy language. Just put care of Paul John Hansen, then the address, and then if you do want to write the zip code, just write near, because zip code stands for zoning improvement project. Now, federal zoning improvement projects only occur on federal land, so it's a deceptive way of getting you to put on a piece of paper that your activity took place in a federal zone, even though it didn't. And then,
Right.
But anyway, what I write underneath it is without the United States, not a resident address. Because resident in the United States Code means this is a definition of resident in the United States Code, statutes at large. It means foreign resident alien. See, nobody is not foreign to the United States system. Everybody, the President of the United States is foreign to the United States system. He's only allowed to operate on their land, in their system, by permission. Nobody is there by right. Okay, so you're always a foreign resident alien if you're of the United States territorial activities.
Wow.
Because nobody's there by right. Nobody. There's no such thing as a right of residency in a federal zone. I mean, it makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
It's owned by the Confederacy. It's for military purposes. You don't have no right here. It's a military purpose.
It's a military state.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so moving on.
Yeah.
So with the license plate situation with cars and how you do that, are there variations per state, or is that something like, all Americans can abide by a certain, standard on figuring that out, or is that have different variations per state?
No, all the states are the same. All the U.S. states are the same. There's only one court in the U.S. system. It's called the United States Court, and if you're not of the United States court system, then you're in the English common law in America. So if you have a car accident, on their land, it goes to the United States court. But they still have to prove up. The use of the vehicle was in a regulatable activity at the time of the accident, in order for the Department of Motor Vehicles of that state to kick in, which is for hire, carrying cargo or passengers for a fee. If they don't have evidence of that, and you never say you weren't carrying passengers or cargo for a fee. You just say, is there any evidence in the possession of the arresting officer or whatever, citing officer? Is there any evidence in his possession that I was in a for-hire activity?
Right. So if you hit somebody and if you hurt somebody or damage their vehicle, how do you go about fixing that or remedying that when you are independent and they are not?
You have private commercial liability, just like you would if you're roller skating down the street and I ran into the back of you and broke your leg. I just have a duty in our society and under God's laws to do what I can to remedy you. If it takes the rest of my life to pay off a bill, that's just the way it goes. That's what happens in life.
Okay, cool. You're probably going to get cut out here, so just go ahead and call me back. And we'll keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the difference between like a license and a covenant? I mean, I guess that's a really easy one to I want to kind of tie this into like the marriage certificate and talk a little bit more about the marriage certificate.
Yeah, a license is by definition is to do something that without is illegal. So. Is there anything in God's creation that you could do that you that you need a license from somebody else to do that would be illegal in God's eyes? I don't know. I'd have to think about it, but it doesn't really pop out at me. No, but a covenant is a solemn vow before God. You covenant. It's not a license. It's not a contractual agreement. It's more than that. I don't remember the exact differences, but they're different. A contract and a covenant are different. You can contract with somebody. I mean, it's not unbiblical at all. You can make covenants with people. Just make sure you follow the biblical standards that are presented. And a marriage that everybody that talks about getting married, they always think, oh, we got to go down and get a marriage license, and they've just been brainwashed into thinking that the marriage license is a good thing, because for a time there it was. But our United States is killing 50 million babies, and they're not really the best person to covenant with anymore. You want to consider, do I really want to give a third party major control of my marriage that has a reputation of killing 50 million babies? I don't think so. So the solution is don't covenant with them. Don't contract with them. Just follow biblical standards. And our country is based on independence, and you have every right and every privilege to be independent, provided you follow God's laws.
Cool. So, and if you contract with the marriage certificate, I don't know, I haven't done all research on this, but is the marriage certificate the thing that gives the state rights over your own children as well?
Yeah, you're entering into a governance. You're actually telling the state that you want their services, and their services are governed by written legislative and congressional law. So you're submitting to those public laws, those published laws in that relationship. Now, I don't understand how you can go to them and ask for a license and then go live on land that's not of the government and work on land that's not of the government, raise your children on land that's not of the government, completely be separate from the government, how they still maintain a contractual relationship. But it's possible that they do. I don't know. But you're definitely stepping into a contractual relationship, especially when you start asking for aids and services and benefits from them when things go south. And of course, you start sending your kids to public schools. That's part of their system.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Okay, I don't have too many more written down here that are specific enough to really make any long conversations about, but there's a lot of disinformation with the whole, as you said, you're independent, don't use the word sovereign as well, because only God's sovereign. So I mean, there's so much out there on the whole birth certificate, social security card. I feel like probably the bulk of it out there is a lot of disinformation, and a lot of people are using, as we discussed in our first interview with you, you said to stay away from the Uniform Commercial Code because it could render you under a different jurisdiction, etc. I guess when you were coming into all this, did you know about capitis diminutia and maritime admiralty law and the yellow fringe or goldfinch flag, de facto versus de jure government? Did you come across all that when you were, learning what you learned?
Yeah, just to touch on UCC, Universal Commercial Code, it is not law. It's something that you can adopt. If you and I go into a business, we can sit down and say, hey Sam, what are we going to use for guidelines here? And you go, well, we could use the UCC. Okay, let's just write that in our contract, and if we have problems with it, we'll write a new contract and take it out. It's simply something you join into by consent. Now, if you get into a banking situation, they'll have paragraphs in there that will say that you're adhering to Universal Commercial Code. Or if you get into a international trade with somebody, they'll say if any dispute comes up, that the first recourse is the UCC. So it's just a contractual thing. Now, as far as de facto and I can't remember the other term.
De jure.
De facto. What was the other one?
De jure.
De jure. Yeah. De facto just simply means that it's something that's been put in place by necessity, and necessity is sometimes by force. So it's really nothing to get too worried about. If you're independent of them, it doesn't make if they're de facto or de jure. So that I just don't even make a big deal out of it.
Right. And how about
I focus on territorial jurisdiction, and see admiralty law is there's always the contract involved. You do not slip into admiralty by stepping on somebody's land. You slip into admiralty by a contract.
Okay.
Contract.
Did you study like the law of the flag or anything like that, like the gold fringe flag? Like, is that a different flag than the American flag that we're supposed to have like in our courts or wherever?
Yeah, the gold fringe is not significant because no part of that flag is yours. None of that. See, when the states were established, they weren't established between the people. They were established between the states. There's a huge difference between the Confederacy of the States and Confederacy of People. It's an entity that's created to do certain functions, and that function is military. That's what that flag represents. It represents that military function. Of course, the Confederacy was established by the wish of people. Everything's established that way. Nothing ever does. No animals got up one day and voted on anything on this planet, so it's always done by people. But the flag represents a confederacy. It doesn't represent people. And the Bill of Rights were not even supposed to be added to the United States Constitution because the Constitution represents the relationship of states. And if people were really good in law, the Bill of Rights would not be there because the Bill of Rights would be maintained in English common law. So many of the people that put the Constitution together said, "What are you putting the Bill of Rights in there for? You're making it sound like it's a compact between people. It's not. It's a compact between states."
How does the court system help keep the national debt down?
Well, national debt is supposed to be based on extended credit. So the more money that comes in is returned to the lender, Federal Reserve, the national debt goes lower. So every time a tax is imposed on people and money is brought into the U.S. Treasury that eventually gets canceled out in the Federal Reserve, the national debt goes down.
So the courts So the courts actually help that.
I don't know. I don't know where their proceeds go. I would assume some of it would eventually get taxed. And see, the way the national debt is alleviated, possibly the only way it's alleviated is by taxation. I don't know if there's any other process that returns the funds back to the Federal Reserve System.
Right, and I think Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought that really realistically, if we were going to have no debt, we would have to return every single dollar back to the Federal Reserve, and there's still no way to pay the interest on that.
Well, you declare bankruptcy, which they've done 3 times. So
Right.
Bankruptcy doesn't hurt them one bit because the Federal Reserve never gave you nothing in the first place except a tool to tax the labor, to confiscate the labor of people. That's what the Federal Reserve is. It's a tool to confiscate productivity of a nation.
Right.
They're not giving you nothing except that tool.
Mm-hmm.
There are statutes in the statutes of large. You will not find this in the United States Code, but you will find it in the statutes of large, where it says a bank cannot deliver notes. It says right in there that a bank is not allowed to deliver its notes to the Federal Reserve. Guess what? Most of the money distributed in our society, or a great amount of it, is because promissory notes are alleged to be delivered to the Federal Reserve for extension of credit. Now, when the Federal Reserve System was established, Congress studied it, and they go, "Oh, well, the banks are not going to take their notes to the Federal Reserve to draw funds. So that's going that's going to tremendously limit the Federal Reserve. So the Congress goes, okay, let's pass it. And then after they passed it, the United States Code transferred the law from the statutes at large. There's supposed to be an accurate revision, but they forgot to leave that paragraph in there. And everybody looks at the United States Code. Very few people go to the original statutes at large. And I work with a guy that's canceled 10,000 notes, promissory notes that way. So when I get out, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But the Federal Reserve is extremely limited by written law, but they're not being limited almost at all. And the problem today is these banks are skipping the Federal Reserve. They're extending credit just simply by computer entry. And that's I've had vice presidents of Wells Fargo in the witness chair where they started crying when I started drawing out their testimony that they were violating law. And then I was arrested and thrown in jail for a year. So they taught me a lesson. Don't mess with the banks.
Right.
But we can talk about that some other time.
Yeah, you actually did talk about that to us on our first interview. So yeah, I know all about that.
Yeah, we're going to revisit all that with a court of record, or the judges can't stop us and the attorneys can't interfere. So I believe we can get justice at the court of record and prove that they will not be able to prove that they have territorial jurisdiction to force Kent to withhold funds from the workers of creation, science, evangelism for several reasons, because there is no contract with the government, and also the activity of CSE was never on government land. There is no legal nexus. We have a right to be independent of them, and they have no right to impose any United States governance on us, where we would remain completely in common law and we'd be subject to the community court of a court of record. So provided we don't do anything.
I want to apologize for my son again. He's just so loud. Okay. I'm just going to try to get through these. So from your perspective, what took so long for them to transfer you from Omaha to Santa Rosa? Was it just the personal jurisdiction, challenge, or was there more to it? I mean, I
think it was just normal. I think it's normal for them to take that long. They got up to 60 or 90 days to transfer you, so it's just normal for them to take that long. I was arrested on October 20. I was arrested October 23rd, and I got here 3 weeks ago, and it's December.
Okay.
Day or 4th.
I figured they'd have you there sooner, and I obviously don't know much, so I broadcasted the last.
You think? Yeah. I was on like 5 different buses and 2 different airplanes, and it was crazy,
Wow.
But they just get you here as cheap as they can. I think that's what it amounts to. They fly me this direction, and then the next day they fly me back to Texas or Oklahoma, and then the next day they fly me closer to this direction, and then it was horrible.
Right.
But they just do it.
Okay.
It's pretty disgusting that federal government can arrest you for just accuse. They claim that you wrote a letter that did no damage to nobody, didn't cost a penny, and they could arrest you with a SWAT team, shackle, take all your. People lose their cars, they lose their houses, they lose their jobs, just because some IRS agent didn't like it that you claim that you still had a legal interest in some property the government took with really flimsy evidence and jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I know that Ernie has been doing things a little bit differently than maybe you would. He's been filing UCC things and whatnot. How are you handling this in contrast to that? And if you don't feel like you want to answer this, it's fine. But I just want to make sure that I understand.
No, that's fine.
So I'm not trying to cause any sort of.
I take completely away. I'm not hiding anything from the opposing party on my defense. But the UCC is not law. It's only something that 2 parties can consent to if they want to use it in their business.
Right.
There's no aspect of law in it at all.
Yeah.
Now, my defense in my case is, yes, I'm challenging territorial jurisdiction. I'm challenging territorial jurisdiction is the law. All law has a territory in which it's supposed to be applied on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the limit of its law. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution tells us where the limit of the United States law is to be applied territorially. Okay, that's the limit of it. And creation, science, evangelism, and in all of my activities, none of it was ever done on federal property, except possibly if my mail passed through a federal zone.
Okay.
They'll have to prove that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as the other challenges, the personal jurisdiction is, what did I say, do or sign for the federal courts to have jurisdiction? Because the federal courts are foreign to me. I am not a U.S. citizen. I'm not living on government land. I don't have any contractual relationships with the United States that they're going to use to gain jurisdiction. So the personal jurisdiction is valid. What did I say? What did I do? Or what did I sign for the United States court in Pensacola to have jurisdiction over me? They hate those jurisdictional challenges like that. Okay, so I said territorial. I said personal jurisdiction. Another one that I'm calling forth is to bring the statutes at large, because they are the law they're charging me with. They always give you the statutes, the United States Code. The United States Code is not law. It's a revised version of law. Many times they drop words out of the revised version to make it appear, to make the scope of the law appear to be broader. So you always want to demand the statutes at large, which is the true legislative bill of the United States Congress, so that you can read the true law that they have jurisdiction to apply. And what are some other challenges? Of course, I'm going for discovery. I want all the witnesses that they're going to bring against me and all the evidence, all the documents. I do give them notice that eventually this is going to be in a court of record, because the U.S. courts are extremely well known to deny meaningful time, meaningful access to the courts. They throw you in jail. You can't. I haven't even got any discovery. Been arrested since October 23rd. I haven't even got one piece of a discovery yet.
Mm-hmm.
They give me an attorney. It's been 3 weeks. He won't answer my calls. He don't send me any letters. He hasn't done nothing for me. It's a sham. Professional lawyers have written books about how attorneys are trained to guide federal defendants right into jail. That's their job, to pretend like they're going to fulfill their constitutional duty to provide counsel, and then they don't, and they guarantee their job, and they can guarantee United States success about prosecutions. There's large books that are written about that.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody in the system, you can ask them, they'll completely agree with you that, oh my gosh, the public pretender is not a cliche, it's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And these attorneys are called in. They tell me occasionally that they're told by the judges to lose the case. They're threatened. If they don't, they get blacklisted, and then it's hard enough being in front of these judges without having a judge have an agenda against you and making your job hell every time you're in front of him.
Yeah.
There's I got like nine different challenges in front of them. I can't remember exactly what they are, but the main ones I just told you about. But venue's another one we're challenging. Why am I being drugged to Florida if I've never been to Florida before? All I did is mail the letter to a title company.
Sure.
Why does that give venue in Florida?
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think, and this, you don't have to answer this if you don't want, but do you think that the way that Ernie is going about things, using the UCC way, could be possibly dangerous?
I think it's a complete waste of time. Just complete waste of time. The only time people win with that stuff is the court lets you win with it because they don't want to admit they have a weak case in the other area, and they try to paint this picture of that it's got some value so that people use it in the future, and they guarantee they're doomed. That stuff has no value at all, and some of the best sites on the internet are owned by the government to mislead you.
Yeah, exactly, and that seems to be where all this points. That seems to be where all this points in all of the research that I did before we even talked to you, is like, oh well, Anderson's commentary of UCC states this, and this is what we're under, and that seems like it could be an awful trap.
Yeah. Does that answer the main body of your question the last time we were talking?
Yes. I just had a couple other questions. Actually, I wanted to discuss one thing with you. Because as I'm nobody. I don't know what I'm doing here with even studying this stuff, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. And when we talked to you again, it just reconfirmed a lot of things. And I just believe that is a genius way to attack the church and Christians and people all over the world and enslave them. But what I wanted to say is that during one of these like spiels that I've watched on the internet from Robin Wright, who is passed away, he helped churches become unincorporated. Buddy, quiet. I ask questions. Okay, so he said he was going through history, and he said that in 1327, Edward III of England charters the ecclesiastical corporations for charitable purposes, and in 1596. Corporate legislation passed in England, creation of the corporate person, powers, capabilities, liabilities determined of the ecclesiastical corporation. And it's interesting that this stuff really goes back very, very far. None of us talk about it in school, or you know what I mean? So I don't know how far in history did you go back to study some of this stuff?
I don't think there's anything wrong with a corporation. The only thing wrong with a corporation is when the courts or the corporation uses it to cover up mischief. For example, a corporation is never going to get an indictment. Only a agent for a corporation can get an indictment. Now, if you go into a civil setting, you'll see a corporation listed as the plaintiff, but never in a criminal case.
Right.
So what does happen is that the vice president, the president, they use this structure to hide some of their evil acts. And I can't remember that Bernhoff, the guy that that billions of dollars scam. Ernie Bernhoff.
Yeah.
They're going around. They're prosecuting some of those guys, so that's good. That they're getting time in jail for handling their trust that was given to them.
Yeah, so what I was going to say with the corporate person thing, like we've talked about corporate personhood, and the word person is a corporation, so if we answer to the word person, that could be in the right setting or the wrong setting, that could be contracting with like a court or with an official or something. And I just thought, the corporate person being created in 1596 was kind of interesting, as that goes very far back, and if we call each other persons and stuff like that. I know we've talked about that briefly in the last time that we talked on our podcast, but I just thought that was interesting. I don't know if you came across some of that stuff. So
yeah, in a civil setting, you need to specify that you're not associated with a corporate person.
Right.
Now, in a criminal setting, you never have to do that, because a corporate person cannot do a criminal act because it's a fiction. It's a thing. Your kitchen table is a fiction. For example, it cannot do nothing. It'll sit there for 10,000 years. It will never do nothing on its own. So don't worry about these capital letters and so forth in a criminal setting, but do consider it in a civil setting, because civil setting, they can go after a corporation,
right,
for damages.
Exactly. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it was important for people to know about that. We're calling each other persons, but it's not necessarily the way to go in that kind of setting.
Yeah. For example, there's a guy in jail here. He's being charged with some kind of IRS tax form manipulation, and my perspective, he tried to do his best on the forms, and they're calling it fraud. But he went to court when he was arraigned, and he says he kept challenging if that was his name or not. And he kept saying, "I'm not a fiction. I'm not a fiction." And the judge says, "Well, you're not a fiction." He says, "Well, I'm not going to claim that name." The judge goes, "Well, if you don't claim who you are, we're going to keep you in jail. Otherwise, we'll let you out, and you can defend yourself on the outside." He says, "I'm not going to defend that fiction." Well, okay. So now he's been sitting in jail for 4 months. All he had to do is just understand that there's no way that an indictment has a fiction name on it, because possible as a defendant. Now, a fiction can be on an indictment as a plaintiff because the plaintiff's not being accused of anything. You know, on the IRS case, the plaintiff is a fiction. It's the United States of America. But anyway, there's an example where a guy sat in jail for 4 months, can't defend himself, worth a hoot in jail.
Right.
All because he said I'm not the capital name.
Right. Okay. I'm just trying to move on here. I only have a couple more that I wanted to knock out before we get cut off. One thing I'll just say, this is a speculative thing. This is not like a definitive statement or anything. But I've, as you study the New World Order and all these things that have been going on for a long time, the Federal Reserve, you start to find different podcasts and things by other Christians that have been, researching this stuff. And this guy named Bill Cooper had this 32-degree Mason on, and I can't verify that this guy was, really who he was, but he did say something very interesting in his interview, and I found it interesting into this conversation, was that he said that statute law and codes, once you make it to I think the 33rd degree or whatever it is, or maybe it's once you're climbing up the I don't remember what point it was, but I believe it was the not the Scottish Rite, but the York Rite, I think it was. I'm not entirely sure, but he said that those things no longer apply to you. And I thought that was really interesting if that were true. I don't know if it's true, and I'm sure that only a select amount of these guys that join the Masons actually get to, to that point where, oh yeah, the statutes don't apply to them and such. But have you ever heard anything like that?
Well, that's true. They do not apply to you, and if you're a high-level Mason, the judge is probably going to know it. They're going to be able to get that information to the judge, especially if he's an active Mason, that, hey, you're dealing with one of us, and he's going to say some words in here, and you can just dismiss the case immediately.
Exactly.
So, codes and statutes are based on statutes at large.
Yep.
Okay, statutes at large have a territorial jurisdiction. If there is no contract with the United States, there is no nexus, because you either have a nexus by territory activity or you have a nexus by contract. Okay, if you don't have either one of those, the statutes at large do not apply to you, which are the same as codes and statutes. Codes and statutes are just a reorganization of the statutes at large for easy reference.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those easy references are manipulated tremendously, especially in the banking world. For example, the Federal Reserve has never been allowed to receive a promissory note from a bank and extend Federal Reserve credits.
Yeah.
That is found in the statutes at large, and that is the biggest reason inflation is existing today, because banks are taking their promissory notes to the Federal Reserve, receiving credit for it. It has never been allowed by Congress. The destruction of the Federal Reserve that is appearing in our society today has never been granted by Congress. The guys that passed the Federal Reserve permission knew the limit of the Federal Reserve in the document, and they said it's going to be a minor effect on the society because they're going to be greatly limited, because they're not going to be allowed to receive notes from banks to extend credit, and that's the vast majority of their credit that's extended today is because of those notes.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to do it.
Right. So, okay, real quick, I want to make sure that I get these questions, these last two things just answered before we get cut off. So
yeah, go ahead.
So briefly on both these questions, I'm going to tell you the questions and you can answer them in whichever order you want. But I guess if you could briefly and concisely explain what charges are brought upon you and Kent right now, and also to sum that up, why should Christians and Americans care about Kent's and your trial?
Well, it's heavy-handed abuse is the biggest reason. The charges, I think there's 5 charges. The main charge is mail fraud. They're claiming that our mail activity constitutes fraud. Now, all I did is mailed a letter. They're claiming that I mailed a letter to a title company, because I was working with a group of people in Nebraska. I don't even know what letter they're talking about yet. I haven't got discovery. but they're claiming I mailed a letter to a title company that was fraudulent. Now, the group that I was in Nebraska working with, we had a letter made up that we were intending to send to the title company, providing that, an attorney that looked at it said it was probably an all right letter to do, which he ended up saying no, and I chose not to participate in that, in some of those letters. But all we did is, I believe, is what they're going to come after us for, is we notified the title company that we believe that the court, U.S. court, never had jurisdiction because there was no contract with the Federals and there was no territorial, no activity on territory of or possession of the United States. Therefore, the U.S. court does not have jurisdiction. They lack subject matter jurisdiction. They just can't make any administrative action toward that property. The federal courts hate this. Ed Rivera he was an attorney. He was going to federal court, making these exact same challenges. He was winning every single case in federal court until they basically framed him and disbarred him.
Right.
Okay. Now the next charge is conspiracy for mail fraud. So they're claiming that Ken and I worked together to do these letters. And the next charge is Kent's got an additional charge other than mine for he filed a les pendum by himself, and they're claiming that was an act of fraud or a violation of a court order or something. And then the other one is they claim that I was subpoenaed to go down to Florida several months before they arrested me to take fingerprints and handwriting exemplars. And I received the subpoena, and I looked at it, and I wrote it back. I said, there's no compelling law in here. There's not one single line on this document that gives me a notice of a legal duty to come down there. All there is a signature of a court clerk saying that I should appear in Florida on such and such date. And I wrote him back. I said, there's no law in here that indicates why I should obey the instructions of this court clerk. Nor is there a line on that statement that says if I don't obey the orders of this court clerk, what the consequences are. You have to have notice. I wrote him back. I said, this on the face of this document, it simply appears as an invitation. I said, I'm not gonna. If you guys want to pay me $3,000 a day, I suppose I'll fly down there and spend a day there and fly back. But I'm not gonna come down there unless you can show me the law requires me to do so. And they never emailed me back. They just ignored me. And that's the extent of the charges there. So the biggest thing is it's heavy-handed attack against the Church of Christ. The lawyer told me that this is ridiculous charges. She read it. She says, this isn't mail fraud. What did you do to piss the government off? And I told her about the website. Kent talks to millions of people about government corruption.
Right.
She goes, well, that's why they're coming after you. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. We got about 30 seconds left.
Yeah. No. Thanks for explaining everything. We obviously have to end it here, but I think we've got a good amount of stuff here, and thanks for your time, and I'll try to get in touch with you again next time that we can do something like this. Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead and write me a letter. Okay.
I will.
Good.
God bless you, Paul.
God bless you. Bye.
All right. Welcome back, and hopefully this is the last Coin Toss / episode that you have to just listen to me, and Dan will join me on the next episodes to come since I'm back. And I know as far as the Free Kent site goes, we're trying to keep updates on this. We've had just a remarkable response to what we've been doing, and I just want to give a shout out right now to a guy named Rudy. Rudy has been doing what I just don't have time to do, which is writing congressmen and writing different stations and just emailing the heck out of people. And I think it's working. I mean, Kent's been on some radio shows, and just want to say God bless you, Rudy, for all your help and all your just what's driving you right now. It's just amazing to see. And so with that being said, with freekent.com, there's some updates that need to take place a little bit here and there. I think right now, the last I heard, Gia had done a short run of shirts. So I don't know if we're going to end up getting more shirts in. I guess it depends if we get any orders in to justify purchasing a bunch more shirts. We we'd have to have a lot more orders. So we'll keep you up to date on that. I think we're raising the money amount to $35 for the $10 shipping that Gia incurs from having to send it from Canada. So I do realize that a lot of Kent's following is here in the States here, the corporate United States of America. But yeah, so we'll try to update you guys on that as that develops. And I just recently went on Canary Cry Radio to do a flyby with Basil and Gons about this whole thing, and I got to rant with them a little bit about meeting them at the Prophecy Forum, which is kind of where all this started. We got together with all these believers, and next thing you know, this whole Kent thing pops up while we're there, and we've been running with it ever since. And so anyway, got to talk to those guys and then talk about Kent and talk about the legal situation and kind of the way I see it, and then closed off the discussion talking a little bit about the album that's going to be coming out this May-ish, the soundtrack to Leonard Ulrich's film. And Gons got to work with me on a song, and actually we're kind of in the works of developing a band, and I'm not sure how it's all going to work yet, but we've got a bunch of demos and ideas, so we'll see. He's a pretty driven dude, and so am I, so got to use that for the Lord. But on that note, if everybody could say a prayer for me right now, I am probably like 1/3 away from finishing a brand new song for the Kent Hovind compilation, but I've been gone, and it just takes me a long time to write lyrics, or it takes a lot of energy from me. It takes me hours to really get it out of my system here and think and, just try to use words of wisdom. But yeah, I'm working on this song called Magistrates. Pray for me to finish this verse. I haven't rapped in quite a long time, so I'm actually rapping on the verses, which is interesting. So in other news, I think we have a new normal episode coming out very soon with Bill Snebelin, which should be a cool episode for the month of February. We've got more coin tosses planned, but we don't really know who we're interviewing first on some of these. So hopefully we'll get some more out there. Hopefully we'll talk to Kent again and talk to a bunch of people. But for now, there's nothing set in stone. So thanks for all your support. And if you haven't gone to freekent.com and donated some money to Brother Kent Hovind and his cause here, I really recommend you go do that. At least pray about it. If you're having doubts about it, or if you have an extra $5 bill in your pocket, whatever, just he could use it, man. So just lift him up, and until next time, don't buy into what the world is selling.